Yes, good morning, everyone. It's a great honor and privilege and happiness to be here, invited as a guest by my friends and colleagues. I'm very happy to be presenting the story to you today. The story which is closely linked to the global-local division, which is the core theme of this conference. Thank you for the invitation again. I appreciate it greatly. The theme is global and local academics, not exactly universities, institutions, but academics, related to global and local journals, global and local research, etc., etc. In more detail, it is highly productive academics across 11 European countries. It's a large-scale study which took me a couple of years to produce, and I'm very happy to be able to give you some answers about who they are, what they think, who they are, what they think. Basically, it's a study of social stratification in universities. There are different classes or segments of academics, and I'm focusing on one of them, the upper 10% on the scale of productivity. I call them research top performers or just highly productive academics. I'm studying their different working habits because they work differently. I'm studying their different academic attitudes because they think differently about universities compared to their colleagues. And finally, I'm talking about their different research outcomes, because everything leads to high productivity, so high research outcomes. There is a gap in terms of knowledge production in Europe, which we're all aware of, but we were not able to capture in terms of numbers. A large-scale survey of European academics, which we have started in 2008 and which is not even finished, it's almost a decade, allowed me to have a look at this specific class, unique class, highly productive academics. But I was interested in something else. I was interested in the predictors of becoming highly productive. What makes you or your colleagues highly productive as opposed to your lower performing colleagues? Is it inherent? Is it socialization to the academia? There's a number of predictors and a number of variables which have to be taken into consideration. The starting point was empirical finding. I didn't know I would be doing this study until I realized that 10% of academics across Europe provide on average almost half of all knowledge production. We expected it, but we didn't really know it. We could expect it from previous studies from Anglo-Saxon countries, especially the US. But for Europe, we are not aware of it. So 10% of academics provide on average half of all academic knowledge production or publications in the 11 countries I studied, and 5% provide 1/3 of all publications. This is an absolutely separate, unique segment of the academic profession. 5%, 1/3, 10%, half. And I'm interested in this upper 10% on a productivity scale by major clusters of fields. So I'm not talking about those most productive in, I don't know, mathematics and chemistry, but across all major academic fields across 11 European countries. So there are remarkably similar productivity distribution patterns. It works across Europe. Even more so, it works perfectly in Poland. Exactly half of Polish academics produce, exactly 10% of Polish academics produce half of academic knowledge production. So it's a very, very general pattern. My question was, first, who are these highly productive academics? And second, which factors increase the odds of entering this segment? Increase or decrease the odds, or the chances to enter this influential and important segment of academic profession. So the question was, what makes some academics substantially more research productive than others? what are the reasons? I use the proxy of academic productivity as a crude measure, which is the number of journal articles. It's a crude measure, but it's the only measure I could be using in this research. I know it's crude, it has its limitations. I will explore the limitations in a moment. Certainly faculty productivity was already explored in the academic literature in the last half a decade, clearly, but mostly in a national context and mostly of Anglo-Saxon countries. We know studies from the 70s, 80s, 90s of American and UK academics. We know a study by Giovanni Abramo and his colleagues about Italian star scientists, but I would say these are all single-nation studies. And I'm focused on cross-national differences and cross-national similarities among those top performers. So indeed, highly productive academics were mentioned in passing, but I would say never or almost never studied in large-scale cross-national context, especially in a European context. So I would say this is where my interest came from, and I devoted 2 years to analysis and thinking and reading, collecting data for this for another 3 years before. But everything we are doing, and Maria will confirm it, in higher education, academic professional studies takes years. A decade is a minimum, as we know from Ulrich Teichler. Right? To produce the data and have final publications, it's a decade. So it's really fundamental research in this sense. Just quick look at previous studies. Certainly Derek de Sola Price, certainly Diana Crane, the Cole brothers, Katarina Prpic, certainly Giovanni Abramo and colleagues, all single-nation studies. I'm going beyond these studies somehow, using them to test the assumptions on a cross-European sample. I'm using large-scale quantitative material. I'm referring to 11 countries, and I'm testing the assumptions arising out of prior single-nation research. I'm interested in intranational differences between those top performers and the rest of academics, which is 90% of academics. But I'm also interested in cross-national similarities among top performers among European countries. So there are two directions, to see the differences intranationally, also in Poland, and to see similarities cross-nationally. I would say right now that they are unique species, very similar across Europe, probably across the world, very similar to each other, and largely different from their lower performing colleagues. But there will be conclusions in a moment. Well, as you can imagine, there can be 3 approaches to studying research productivity. You can have interviews, interviewing people what they think. Why are you so bloody successful? You can have surveys. This is what we did, large-scale surveys with hundreds of variables to study them quantitatively. And certainly we can have bibliometrics, something that was done in the Italian system. When you have good data at the national level, you can have bibliometric analysis. But in contrast to prevailing bibliometric studies, I think that it's still useful to refer to traditional surveys. It looks outmoded, but it's enormously useful. You can do, using surveys, you could do things which you cannot do through bibliometrics. Because I'm interested in the what of knowledge production, so the numbers, certainly, this is bibliometrics, but I'm even more interested in the why of knowledge production, why these people are so enormously more productive than the rest, so predictors, and this is something which you cannot do today through bibliometrics. So numbers, bibliometrics, fine, but also academics behind the numbers, surveys and interviews. I'm preparing, it's already submitted, a project in Poland to not only survey but also interview Polish top performers. About 80, 90 top performers interviewed, and 600 already explored through surveys. So in this research today, I'm using a combination of inferential and logistic regression analysis to explore this segment. First, inferential analysis and then logistic regression. It's not going to be complicated, as you can imagine. It's going to be somehow simple. What I want to say is that this segment of higher education academics is extremely under-researched, but this segment is also highly influential. We don't realize how influential they are, I would say, in terms of funding and access to funding, in terms of prestige, awards, but also, which I studied recently and which I finished recently, in terms of rewards or of salaries. Top performers and top earners, I call them European top earners, are a largely overlapping community of academics. Top earners overlap up to 40% with top performers, for instance, in the UK. Again, we expect it somehow intuitively, but now we can say it, but it's another story just finished. Empirical point of departure in this story, you can see it graphically. I wanted to make sure everyone knows graphically what I'm talking about. Here we have the percentage of journal articles produced in the reference period of 3 years by research top performers, the upper 10% in the total national knowledge production by country. You see 5 countries around 50%. It's Ireland, Netherlands, Finland, Portugal, but also Poland, and this is surprising, but also Poland. I'll be delighted to see how it works in Russia, and we already arranged it with Maria that she will do a study of Russian top performers. So post-communist Poland is not different from Western Europe, which provides a number of different motivations in my reform agenda for Poland. We are not different, we are just underfunded. We don't have mechanisms and we don't have incentives, but we are not different at a large scale. The pattern is exactly the same for Poland. The outlier case is certainly Italy, but we know why to some extent. Italy, in our survey, is the most highly productive country studied. So outlier is Poland, and also in the sense of the number of papers produced in a 3-year reference period. Yeah, there are no other senses like Web of Science papers or co-authored papers. It's a crude measure, the number of papers published per academic in a reference period. I will give you here the Polish example, looking at clusters of academic fields. It works in a similar pattern across Europe. Look here, it's Polish research top performers, the percentage of their papers by cluster of academic fields. In physics and mathematics, it goes up to 60%. Yeah? So top performers, 10% of academics produce up to 60% of papers. It's very important in any thinking about large-scale reforms, especially in transition countries, how to save these people, how to possibly not let them go abroad, I would say, wherever abroad. Because if you slash them in the system, you slash half of the knowledge production, possibly in very good journals, but it's another story, quantity and quality, which I will discuss in a second. So the highest concentration of the production of top performers is in physics and mathematics, and the lowest is certainly in social science and the humanities. The answer is because of the low level of co-authored publications. Yeah? But anyway, it's from 40 to 60%, and the patterns are similar in all countries I studied. Very briefly, the data and the methods. 2 approaches which I already mentioned, statistical inference and logistic regression model, and the data. They come from 2 large-scale projects, CAP and EuroAC, with more than 17,000 usable cases in Europe. It's more than 25,000 globally, but more than 70,000 in Europe. And comparing 2 subpopulations, the upper 10% in terms of productivity by clusters of fields and by countries, which is about 1,600, and I'm comparing them to 12,000, the rest or remaining academics, with one condition. They all indicated research involvement, and they all said, okay, how productive I am, how many hours I spend per week on research, etc., etc. So you can see the sample is smaller than 17,000, it's 12,000. 11 countries, you can see them here. It's a great pity. Only Poland comes from the post-communist world. It's a great pity. But it gave me an opportunity to compare Poland to the West, which was very nice. As you can see, the data set was prepared by the Kassel team under Ulrich Steichler's supervision. There were 400 variables. I would say we were able to know almost everything about academics. We never used this opportunity. We produced 600 papers over a decade. It's still nothing. I would say it's still nothing. But some of us get tired and get older. We have, I would say, a problem of data-rich environment in which we can have more data than human capacity and motivation to study the data or explore the data. In some areas, higher education academics might be one of those areas even today, but we are expecting a new CAP 2 project for another 5 to 7 years. My approach is certainly individual, so I'm relying on primary, it's important, primary data. You have to produce it, collect it. It takes time and it's costly, but I would say it's worth it. So it's primary data rather than any secondary data. It's voluntarily provided by academics. It takes 40 minutes to 1 hour from each academic. So we are talking about thousands of hours spent by European academics on our survey. I appreciate it enormously, also in Poland, enormously. And finally, the data are in a consistent, internationally comparable format. So everything had to be translated into comparable format by all participating countries. It was done, and the data set is ready. The unit of analysis, therefore, is the individual academic, not the system, not an institution, an individual academic, which makes sure we are able to explore individual productivity and its predictors, rather than productivity patterns in a system or in an institution. Certainly, and I agree with you if you say this, there are standard limitations as in any international comparative research. We have 11 countries, we have 11 faculty rank systems, we have 11 systems with universities or without, etc., etc. All limitations do apply, I must say. It's true, but there's no other way to move beyond single nation studies. But I have to admit, there are standard limitations. Certainly, one of them is the quality-quantity dilemma, or my focus on publication numbers. There's no link between publications and their value, especially when bibliometrics comes into fore. No relationship between publications and prestige of journals. I cannot do this. It's not bibliometrics. But what I can do is link publications to individuals, what they think, how they work. It's an added value, yeah? We're discussing it with Giovanni. Bibliometrics has its advantages and disadvantages, but also surveys are useful. Let me quote what Mary Frank Fox said a couple of decades ago, and I agree with it fully. It is through publications that scientists receive professional recognition and esteem, as well as promotion, advancement, and funding for future research. I would say publications are the core of the university business, and in what Mr. Rector said today, and what was discussed by rectors of a Russian university yesterday, is referring exactly to this. Publications and the level of journals, top journals only, I would say. Okay, but this quality-quantity dilemma cannot be easily solved. I have a simple assumption here, quoting from myself, just more productive academics produce more articles, and less productive academics produce fewer articles. Full stop period. It's a simple assumption. Following the Cole brothers, decades ago, who said that high producers tend to publish the more consequential research. Engaging in a lot of research is in one sense a necessary condition for the production of high quality work. I could develop this theme of quantity-quality dilemma, but it's not worth it at the moment. I accept it. There is a link, there is a correlation, and I buy it as it is. Very briefly, the theoretical context or theories of research productivity. Really briefly, certainly productivity was studied for decades. Certainly we have a number of factors which were already explored. Just to give you an example, the size of the department, or reward and prestige system in a given country, or faculty collaboration, or being a male academic, and many, many, many others. They have all been reported in national studies, many, many more. I'll briefly mention three theories: the sacred spark theory, the cumulative advantage theory, and the utility maximizing theory. Just one sentence per each, please. We don't have more time. The sacred spark theory, just quotations. There are substantial predetermined differences among scientists in their ability and motivation. We understand this. Highly productive scholars are motivated by an inner drive, by the love of the work, or they have the stamina or the capacity to work hard. This is the core of the sacred spark theory. Some people are good, some people are just superb. It makes a difference. It's a simple theory. The second theory is the cumulative advantage theory, coming from Robert K. Merton. Just one quotation again: productive scientists are likely to be even more productive, and low performance will be even lower, yeah, over the time. And one more, if we think of incentives, scientists who are rewarded are productive, and scientists who are not rewarded become less productive. And this is a large-scale American-based accumulative advantage theory. Finally, just one sentence about this utility maximizing theory. Over the age, when academics get older, they are becoming less productive. Yeah, this is the theory. With each additional year, rewards for doing research decline. It's not a big business to become more prestigious when you are already highly prestigious. So this is another theory. I would say these theories are complementary rather than competing, but if I refer them to highly productive academics, only the two first work. It's sacred spark and it's cumulative advantage. This declining of productivity over age in my sample of top performers doesn't work. Definition here of what is research productivity is simple: self-reported number of articles. It's generally accepted definition. Reference period can be different. Here it's 3 years, as in Teodorescu. Again, some graphics. You see big N's and small N's. On the right side, you have about 1,600 research top performance and about 14,000 research involved academics. It's not exactly 10%. We couldn't find cutting off points to have exactly 10% of high performance. We have 11%, but I'm saying 10 because it sounds better. Now a bit more details. I'm not interested in descriptive statistics at all. So it's only statistical inference and then the model. I'm interested only in statistically significant results. So it's bivariate analysis. Behaviors, academic behaviors in this case is hours spent on research, teaching, total hours per week by academics, various academics. And attitudes means, in this case, my preference for teaching, research, both, none. None is not. It's not in the statistics. So the two questions were working habits of top performers. Different? I would say yes, very much different. And research orientation or academic orientation different? Yes, absolutely different. I will show you the details in a second. The highly productive academics are just different sort of academics. I explored, sorry for this pluralis majestaticus here, so I'm saying I, yeah? It's not we. I studied five dimensions: teaching, research, service, which is outside work for the community or for business, administration, and anything else. Other is anything else. And I explored 4 academic roles: primary teaching, primary research, or both, but with some leaning towards teaching or towards research. You can see the details here. Just look at the research line and the total hours line. Generally, you see top everywhere. And the question was, how long do you spend on various academic activities? I'm comparing the means, yeah, the means of hours between top performers and the rest. Everywhere, I would say, overwhelmingly, top performers have longer working hours. Not only total working hours, but also Other duties, working hours, administration working hours, service, especially research. You can hardly anywhere see the rest of academics working longer in any category. So one conclusion is working longer hours. This is a strong predictor, which I will say later in the model, of becoming a high performer. I would give you the details, how many hours you need to be working every week to have a higher chance to become a top performer. It's about 10 weeks a year, 10 hours a week, which is about more than 2 months a year spent on research, more than 2 months every year. But it will be in a moment. Certainly, there are different tickets to enter this class. In the more competitive systems, you have to work longer per week. In less competitive systems like Poland or Portugal, the ticket costs you less. The differential is lower. But in Norway or in Germany, it's a minimum of 10 hours on average more a week. And now, Ztest for the equality of fractions of percentages. The question was, regarding your own preferences, do your interests lie primarily in teaching, research, both? Again, if you look at teaching lines and then you look at research lines, you see the difference. Predominantly in research and leaning towards research, top is everywhere. This category appears across the board. And being primarily interested in teaching or leaning towards teaching virtually excludes, on average, statistically speaking, excludes academics from being a highly performing academic. So the lesson is below. The lesson is simple. A research role orientation is a powerful indicator of belonging to the class of the high performers. Being research-oriented is virtually a must. Again, statistically speaking, there may be differences. It may happen, but it's rare. On the other hand, also statistically, being teaching-oriented virtually excludes from the class of high performers, which provides some lessons to our younger colleagues about their careers, who they want to be, where they want to be, how they want to be promoted, what money they want to make also, by the way. Yeah? Rewards, awards, and prestige and everything. They know where the core of being a top performer is. It's in strong inclination towards research. And it's a very, very strong analysis, which is slightly softened in the model version. This is bivariate analysis. If we move on to logistic regression analysis, everything is softened. But I'm suggesting a combination of several methods to see it from different angles. Anyway, top performers appear only in the research line. Yeah? So if we have, as in Ukraine or in parts of Russia or in parts of Poland, hundreds of hours of teaching as a yearly workload, it excludes us from being top performers from a comparative perspective. Locally, yes, but there's a different ticket to enter this elite in different countries. So, ever more working hours. This is the details which I wanted to bring your attention to. Different working patterns, certainly, different nationally, but similar internationally across all those 11 systems. Also, different research orientation from the rest of academics, but similar cross-nationally. And now the details, again, statistically significant. Longer total working hours and longer research hours, week by week, month by month, possibly year by year. In the UK, to give you an example, you have to spend up to 8 more hours every week to belong to this class of high performers. And I translated it into weeks, into days. It's 33 full working days for Poland, which is more than a month and a half, including weekends. And it's almost 2 months, additional 2 working months spent on research in the UK. So it's not only more hours, but especially more research hours. But surprisingly, as you saw it here a moment ago, top sign appears everywhere. So top performers spend more time on every academic activity. yeah, activity. Also, let me have a look here. Also, in some countries, they spend substantially more time on teaching, but it's, I would say, a minor issue, and it's not statistically. It's statistically important only in 3 countries. So, what we know about top performers is also high level of internationalization in research. We know it. We know it. So my question was, what is the productivity of academics by international cooperation, yes or no, and by clusters of academic fields? You can see the average here, average European, but you can do it separately for each country, providing the sample is big enough. Let's have a look at physics and mathematics. Yes, I'm cooperating. 8 papers, on average, statistically significant. And no, less than four papers. So results are similar for each country separately. I did it for Poland because I have a huge sample for Poland. The Polish sample is for almost 4,000 return surveys. There is a strong positive correlation between high performance and productivity. Certainly, it's not a causal effect. There's a number of issues which I don't want to discuss here. It's not exactly causal, yeah? But at least there is a positive correlation. Top performers are highly internationalized in the research. Finally, 2 very brief slides about logistic regression analysis. I built a model. There were 42 variables in 8 clusters. The major division was individual factors and institutional level factors. And the answer from the model, we did 11 models. We did models for each country, and then we had four models for each country. But the answer is here that individual level variables are much more important in becoming a top performer. Much more important. Institutional levels in Europe are somehow insignificant. It makes Europe different from the US. We thought that intellectual climate of productivity, good atmosphere for cooperation works. In the European case, it's not statistically significant. The Nagel-Curtis R-square is pretty high, the model fit is pretty good, and the patterns are strong. Here are some details. These are predictors of becoming a research top performer. Variables which increase or decrease the chances. Yeah, increase or decrease the chances. Certainly, individual level variables emerge as more important. Institutional variables emerge as of marginal importance. Being a female is a predictor in 2 countries only, certainly of not becoming a top performer, but only in 2 countries. Compared to the past research, it's a huge achievement. Traditionally, being a female was increasing the chances to be highly productive. So I would say it's an increase over the decades. Being a professor, certainly 3 to 4 times. Being internationalized in various aspects at least doubles the chances. International cooperation, international publication, everything international at least doubles the chances of entering this class. Finally, one word and conclusions. Finally, findings from this multi-dimensional model support only some findings from bivariate models. That's why I'm using both approaches, because if we use only the model, some findings cannot be shown. I believe in the combination of these approaches, so I'm using both. And the conclusions. The first conclusion is the title here, the 10-50, which I call the 10-50 rule, the 10-50 rule in knowledge production, in academic knowledge production. There are complexities in the very concept of academic profession. There are academic professions, and certainly top performers are somehow a separate segment. We don't know to what extent this separate segment is able to function because of the other 90% of academics. That is another issue. If we had only top performers, what would that be? That would be a disaster for our universities in terms of teaching, in terms of academic duties, administration, etc. But this is the rule. It's interesting to use at the disaggregated picture. This is a divide which doesn't appear in national statistics or even in institutional level statistics. There is this divide, top performers versus the rest. We expected it, we know it, we knew it, but now we can show it. I'm somehow corroborating the systematic inequality of knowledge production known from the 30s and from the 60s, from Alfred Lotka, Derek Del Sol, and the Solar Prize, and others. I called it this way, the 10-50 rule. Who are highly productive academics? They are a highly homogeneous group, similar all over, I would say all over Europe, possibly all over the world, but we don't have global data on this. I hope we will soon, within 2-3 years. Their high performance is driven by structurally similar factors, which means these factors cannot be easily replicable. We cannot apply these factors because they are individual related, not institution related. So public policy doesn't work here easily. From whichever country they come, they work according to similar working patterns. We just know it. And they share similar academic attitudes. We know it. There's a strong preference in the case of them for research over teaching. There are no exceptions. The rules are very hard. And we need to remember, if we want to give advice to newcomers or to young people, this is strong pattern which have been shown to exist in the last half a decade at least in Europe right now. And in single nation cases over the last 4 decades for many countries, especially Anglo-Saxon. So they are similar across Europe, and they also differ substantially intranationally from their colleagues. They differ substantially intranationally. They think alike cross countries, and they think differently if we compare them within our countries. I call them universal academic species. Universal academic species. One more conclusion before finishing. Science takes time, and much more scientific production takes much more time. This is evident. Science takes time. There are no shortcuts. You can't be, statistically speaking again, based on a large sample of academics, really highly productive without spending thousands and thousands of research hours, total hours and research hours. So, I'm providing here large-scale evidence, cross-national evidence for old theses known in the studies of higher education that, quote, just 2 quotes, only a small proportion of scientists produce the bulk of science, and another quote, there is enormous inequality in scientist research productivity. We shouldn't expect it in our policy from everyone, in any place, any time. There are limits, I would say probably natural limits, but also other limits which make it the case, and we have evidence from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and other decades. Times are changing, but the patterns are the same. Finally, the very last slide, who they are certainly much more cosmopolitan. So it's the power of internationalization in research. They are much more hardworking, clearly. The power of long overall working hours and long research hours. And they are much more research-oriented, which shows the power of a single academic focus, not divided focus, maybe service, maybe consulting, maybe teaching, maybe something else. It's clearly focused in research. The evidence is strong, I would say, solid. The theoretical foundation for this research is relatively strong. I hope it is an elegant, convincing story, not just a story, but an elegant and convincing story, with one public policy implication. In Europe, this is the last sentence probably, in Europe the research funding architecture is becoming more and more individualized, grant-based. And in this case, the role of top performers is getting even higher. Their role is increasing because they are accumulating power, prestige, access to talents, and resources. So we can expect even stronger concentration of high top performance among this 10 or 15% in Europe than less, especially that the data are clear for all over Europe regarding changes in research funding, It's ever more competitive, ever more individualized. Think of ERC grants, most prestigious in Europe. ERC grants are fully individual. Me, myself, my track record, my publications, my project. Yeah? This is the core of the changes. And it's a good example for national research councils. The Polish National Research Council is modeled upon European Research Council, fully. The same panels, the same ideas, the same basic arguments. Only the top research, only track record, only publications in top journals. So I see the changes, I try to examine them. Where that is leading us, it's another story. I don't know. I don't know where this concentration is leading us, what it's making of us. We are making, some of us are working more and more and more, and others are relatively leisured, yeah? And we see the gap between those, hard working all the time and the rest. And it's somehow depressing. It's not possible to keep it for a long time. My answer for Poland is, let's keep research and teaching somehow more separate. Yeah, keep it separate, keep separate incentives, keep separate mechanisms, and then this precious segment of academics will survive. If not, they go to the US, because in the US, the structure is absolutely different. In some places, you do mostly research. In Poland, it's just impossible. You do teaching and research and everything. Okay, I hope this is it, exactly 40 minutes, as I promised. Thanks so much. Any comments are most welcome. Thank you.